She marched onto my lawn, sprayed my service dog in the face, and smiled like she'd won. What she didn't know, that one spray bottle just triggered a federal offense. And her own downfall. If you had told me 2 months ago I'd be memorizing the fine print of federal disability law just to survive suburban life, I would have laughed. But life is a strange way of testing your calm. Not through chaos, but through the kind of slow, calculated madness that lurks behind manicured lawns and HOA newsletters. Sunnyside Estates wasn't where I imagined starting over. After 8 years of military service and 2 tours overseas, the idea of peace and quiet was more than just appealing. It was necessary. And Sunnyside, with its leafy walking trails, gated security, and clean-cut image, seemed like the perfect retreat for a guy trying to stitch together the frayed edges of his life. I wasn't chasing luxury. I was chasing stability. More importantly, I was thinking of Maverick. Maverick, my golden retriever, has been more than a dog since the day we met at a veterans rehab program. He's been my lifeline, my protector, the anchor that grounds me when PTSD rears its ugly head. Crowded grocery stores, car backfires, unexpected noises. He's trained to spot the signs before I do and guide me out of the spiral. When we moved into the quiet little cul-de-sac on Cedar Elm Lane, I thought we'd found our sanctuary. Little did I know, war zones don't always wear camouflage. Sometimes they wear khaki shorts and carry clipboards. You can tell a lot about people by how they treat animals. And in my world, Maverick isn't just a dog. He's a soldier in his own right. Calm, trained, loyal to the core. The day we moved in, he trotted beside me in his blue service vest, sniffing the new air, tail swishing like a metronome set to piece. I remember standing at the edge of the driveway, watching the last moving truck disappear down the road, while Maverick sat at my side, alert as always. "I think we're going to like it here, buddy," I said, scratching behind his ear. He leaned into me, like he always does, like he knows I need that connection even more than he does. I spent the rest of the afternoon setting up the house, making sure Maverick's water station was in the usual corner, testing the locks on the doors, and memorizing the layout. Little things that help keep the anxiety at bay. Maverick never left my side, not even when the doorbell rang for the first time. He stood, ears perked. I exhaled. Let's see who's at the gates of paradise. I muttered. I opened the door to find a woman who could have passed for the mascot of a retirement-themed Monopoly game. Clipboard in hand, white visor angled with mathematical precision, and a facial expression that had never known the joy of a genuine smile. "I'm Karen Whitfield," she announced, not asked, as if unveiling a plaque. "President of the Sunnyside Estates HOA. Her eyes didn't stay on me long. They dropped down to Maverick, who sat in perfect posture by my side, vest clearly visible, golden fur gleaming like a medal, her lips puckered. I don't believe I approved a dog in this community. I blinked. "You don't need to. He's a service dog." Karen's expression didn't change. "This is a pet-restricted neighborhood." "Maverick isn't a pet," I said evenly. "He's a federally registered service animal, protected under the ADA. She squinted. "Ada, the Americans with Disabilities Act," I said. "Federal law." Karen's nostrils flared slightly, like I'd said something deeply offensive. She glanced at her clipboard, tapped her pen twice, then back at Maverick. "People always find loopholes," she muttered. Before I could respond, she spun on her white sneakers and walked off. And that was our welcome to Sunnyside. Maverick didn't growl. He didn't even flinch. But I did. In the military, you learn to read the battlefield before the first shot's fired. It wasn't just the words Karen used that set off my alarms. It was the way she said them, the way her gaze lingered on Maverick like he was some sort of uninvited pest, not a working animal saving someone's life. So I did what veterans do when a threat presents itself. I prepared. That night, I went through my files, pulling out Maverick's full certification records, his training history, even the laminated ADA cards that detail public access rights. I made copies, scanned backups, and tucked the folder into a drawer by the front door. I wasn't looking for a fight. I was hoping not to need any of it. But I knew better than to trust hope alone. The next morning, I walked Maverick down the trail behind the neighborhood, keeping an eye out for the watchful eyes behind half-closed curtains. Some waved. A few nodded. One or two smiled. But I felt it, the unspoken question. The same one Karen had voiced without saying the words. What's he doing here? 2 days later, it began. I came home from the grocery store to find a neon pink notice taped to my door. Notice of HOA violation, property infraction, hashtag 347A. Front lawn exceeds height regulations by 1.25 inches. Please correct within 48 hours to avoid penalty. I looked at the date. We'd moved in 3 days ago. I hadn't even unpacked the lawn mower yet. I took Maverick for a walk to clear my head, try to chalk it up to HOA diligence. But the next day, another notice arrived. Mailbox color does not match committee-approved shade of matte black. Immediate repaint required. And 2 days after that, garbage cans visible from the street for more than 30 minutes after pickup. Each one came signed with the same looping, overly elegant signature. Karen Whitfield, HOA president. That smiley face hit harder than any mortar round. I complied, trimmed the grass, repainted the mailbox, timed the trash cans to the minute. I told myself it would pass, that once Karen realized I wasn't the kind to make waves, she'd back off. But Maverick knew better. I could see in his eyes every time Karen's car crawled past the house, like a predator scoping a perimeter. Something wasn't right, and something was coming. By the second week in Sunnyside Estates, I felt like I was walking a tightrope, balancing between civility and resistance. Karen's notices weren't just rules. They were warnings, little jabs masked in polite HOA language. And Maverick? He never let his guard down. Neither did I. But nothing, and I mean nothing, could have prepared me for what Karen had planned next. It was a Tuesday when I got the fourth violation. This time, it wasn't taped to the door. It was delivered. I was on my front porch with Maverick, sipping a cup of lukewarm coffee while the late morning sun crept over the rooftops. That's when I spotted her. The same visor, the same clipboard, the same stiff gait like the HOA board had been summoned for a formal inspection. Karen didn't even bother with a greeting. She marched up the walkway like she owned the deed to my home. "Mr. Walker," she said, scribbling something onto a form, "you've now been cited 4 times. That's the threshold for an HOA compliance review hearing." I raised an eyebrow. "A what?" She held out a bright orange slip. "You'll need to appear before the board next Thursday. Non-attendance will result in an automatic fine and a vote on sanctions." I stared at her, all because my garbage was out for 45 minutes. Karen's face remained stone cold. Rules are rules. She glanced at Maverick. He was lying beside me, eyes open, head on his paws, quiet but watchful. "Still no HOA-approved dog tag, I see," she said. "He's not a pet," I replied calmly. "He's a working dog." Karen gave a tight smile. "That's your interpretation." "No," I said slowly, "that's the federal government's." She didn't answer, just turned and left. Maverick let out a low breath through his nose. "Same, buddy, same." That week, I started collecting the violation slips in a manila folder labeled evidence. The smiley face at the end of Karen's signature wasn't charming anymore. It was sinister, like she was daring me to fight back, daring me to call her bluff. By Friday, the neighbors had started whispering. At the mailbox, I overheard an older couple murmuring about how she ran off the last family. At the dog park, a woman pushing a stroller warned me to keep my head down. Another neighbor, a guy in his 50s who looked like he hadn't slept in weeks, muttered, "Don't cross her. She lives for this." I asked him why no one said anything, why no one stood up to her. He just laughed bitterly. "Because she always wins." But not this time. I wasn't just a guy with a dog. I was a soldier. I had faced things Karen Whitfield couldn't imagine in her most HOA-fueled nightmares. And she had no idea how prepared I really was. The next HOA meeting took place in the clubhouse, a beige, dimly lit space that smelled of vanilla candles and overused authority. The room was half filled with residents sitting on metal folding chairs. The HOA board perched behind a long plastic table like courtroom judges in retirement polos. Karen sat in the center. Of course she did. The moment the meeting opened, she launched into her latest agenda item. "We are proposing a new ordinance," she announced, holding up a stack of typed pages. "All animals within the community, including service animals, must be registered with the HOA and display official Sunnyside identification tags when in public spaces." I felt every head in the room turn toward me. Even before she added, "This is to ensure compliance and safety for all residents." I raised my hand. Karen narrowed her eyes. "Yes, Mr. Walker?" I stood. Maverick remained beside me, vest on, perfectly poised. "With all due respect," I began, "this rule directly conflicts with federal law under the Americans with Disabilities Act. Service animals cannot be required to wear identifying gear beyond what their handlers choose, and they're exempt from registration rules that apply to pets." Karen's jaw tightened. "Community safety takes precedence." "No," I said firmly. "Federal law takes precedence." There was a beat of silence. Then Karen said something I'll never forget. "This isn't Washington, D.C., Mr. Walker. This is Sunnyside. And in Sunnyside, the board decides what's best." A few neighbors exchanged uneasy glances, but no one else spoke. After the meeting ended, people began filing out. I waited until the room had mostly cleared before standing up. Maverick remained at my side. As I moved toward the door, Karen intercepted me. She leaned in so close I could smell the stale coffee on her breath. "If you want to be difficult," she whispered, "I can be difficult too." I didn't respond. I didn't flinch. I didn't let her see the anger simmering just beneath the surface. But Maverick did. He shifted slightly, standing between us, not aggressively, but protectively. Karen stepped back. "Take care of your dog," she said coldly. And then she was gone. I stood in the doorway a moment longer, scanning the room, watching the neighbors avoid eye contact, watching the vice president of the board pretend to reorganize papers. I realized then they were all afraid of her, and fear, unchecked and unchallenged, had made Karen powerful. But fear only works on people who haven't faced worse. I had, and I wasn't afraid of Karen Whitfield. Later that night, as I was locking up the house, Maverick's ears perked. He moved the front window, tail stiff, body tense. A white SUV crawled past the house, headlights off. Karen, she didn't stop, just drove by slowly, deliberately. Maverick didn't bark, but he didn't move either. I stepped beside him, hand on the doorknob, just in case. The next morning, I found a sticky note on my mailbox. Still no tag. Tick-tock. No signature. But none was needed. The intimidation was no longer subtle. It was a declaration. That weekend, I printed out copies of the ADA guidelines, federal service dog protection laws, and even state-level legislation on service animal rights. I mailed them to the HOA board. Then I did something else. I called a lawyer. Not to sue. Not yet. Just to be ready. Because something told me Karen wasn't done. And neither was I. By Sunday morning, the note on my mailbox was gone. But the message lingered. Tick-tock, like a countdown. A threat without a clock, but with a purpose. Karen wasn't bluffing. She was waiting, watching, and I knew something was coming. It was early Saturday morning, just past 8 a.m., when the silence shattered. Maverick and I were out on the porch. He lay beside my rocking chair, soaking in the golden spring sun, alert but relaxed. I sipped coffee, scanned the headlines, tried to convince myself it was just another quiet day in suburbia. Then came the shadow. I looked up to see Karen Whitfield standing on my lawn. Khaki shorts, polo shirt, clipboard under one arm, spray bottle in the other. I didn't move. Maverick noticed her first. His head lifted slowly, posture shifting. "You've been warned," Karen said loudly, her voice echoing across the cul-de-sac. "Your animal is in violation of HOA rules." I stood up, calm, controlled. Maverick is a service dog, Karen. He is not subject to HOA pet regulations. She raised the spray bottle. I stepped forward. "Don't." Karen's face twisted in rage. "Maybe if you people didn't think you were above the rules, we wouldn't have to deal with this kind of Before I could respond, she aimed. PSSSSHD. The stream hit Maverick square in the face. He yelped a sharp, wounded cry and staggered back, pawing at his eyes. I dropped my mug and lunged, placing myself between them. What the hell is in that? I demanded, grabbing the bottle from her hand. Just vinegar and water, she said smugly. It won't hurt him. Maybe now he'll learn to respect authority. I stared at her, not blinking, my entire body humming with restrained fury. She looked smug, but I wasn't thinking about her anymore. I was thinking about Maverick. I scooped Maverick up, his face dripping, his breathing quick and shallow. His eyes were red, irritated, blinking rapidly. Easy, boy. Easy, I whispered. Karen was still shouting something behind me as I slammed the front door and carried Maverick into the bathroom. I knelt beside the tub, turned on the faucet, and gently ran water over his face, cupping in my hands to rinse his eyes. He flinched at first, but then leaned into the stream, his breathing slowing. I inspected his pupils, watched for any severe reaction. His heartbeat calmed beneath my hand. The vinegar had irritated him, but thank God there was no permanent damage. That's when the soldier in me woke up. This wasn't just harassment. This was assault. Not on me, on him. My service dog. My protector. I dried Maverick off, clipped his vest back on, and walked calmly to the living room. Picked up the phone. Dialed. 911, what's your emergency? My service dog has been attacked, I said, by the president of my HOA. She sprayed him in the face with a chemical solution. The dispatcher's voice sharpened. Is the animal injured? Yes, temporarily. He's recovering now. Sir, did the individual know it was a service animal? He was wearing his vest, and I've told her multiple times. The dispatcher's voice changed completely. That's a federal offense. Officers are on the way. It took less than 20 minutes for the squad car to pull into the neighborhood. 2 officers stepped out, one older, calm, methodical, the other younger, scanning everything. I opened the door. Maverick sat at my side, stoic, alert, dignified. Officers, I greeted. This is Maverick. He's a registered service animal. The woman across the street, Karen Whitfield, assaulted him with a spray bottle this morning. I have his ADA papers, his certification, everything. The senior officer knelt in front of Maverick, examining him. You okay, boy? Maverick licked his hand. It was answer enough. I handed over a folder with everything. ADA registration, veterinary clearance, and a log of prior violations. I even had the bottle, still damp, still smelling of vinegar. The younger officer took it. You mind if we speak to the neighbor? I gestured across the street. Be my guest. From my window, I watched as they approached Karen's house. She answered quickly, animatedly. Her hands flailed. She pointed toward my place repeatedly. Her voice grew louder. But the officers didn't look amused. The older one calmly listened. The younger one said something I couldn't hear. But whatever it was, it made Karen stop mid-sentence. She backed up. Her face twisted. She looked scared. Then came the handcuffs. The entire neighborhood watched from behind blinds and cracked doors as Karen Whitfield, the same woman who'd lorded over every front lawn for years, was escorted across her driveway in handcuffs. She wasn't quiet about it. This is absurd. You'll be hearing from my attorney. He's not even disabled. This is a setup, a witch hunt. I opened the door as the officers returned. She admitted to spraying the dog, the older one said. Claimed it was just vinegar and water. Still, interfering with a service animal is a federal crime under the ADA. Also falls under state animal cruelty laws. The younger one added, We're placing her under arrest. You good to press charges? I didn't even blink. Absolutely. As they loaded her into the cruiser, she locked eyes with me. You'll regret this, she hissed. I will have you evicted. You and that mutt. I said nothing. But a few neighbors had stepped outside now. One older woman, arms crossed, shaking her head. She's finally gone too far, someone muttered. As the cruiser pulled away, the neighborhood changed, not physically, but the atmosphere heavy with years of quiet compliance. Lifted just slightly, people started talking. A couple I'd seen walking their toddler approached me later that afternoon. "We wanted to stand up to her for years," the husband said, "but she always had the board in her pocket. You did the right thing." Another neighbor, a retired teacher, brought over cookies and simply said, "Thank you for what you did for him," nodding toward Maverick. The final surprise came that evening. A knock on the door. Maverick perked up but stayed seated. I opened it to find the HOA vice president, Mr. Larson, standing on my porch, holding a clipboard without arrogance. "I wanted to apologize," he said, "for not speaking up. At the meeting, we were scared of her. She bulldozed over everyone." I nodded. "I get it. We're calling an emergency board meeting," he said. "This has gone too far, and we can't let someone like that represent this community anymore." He paused. "You and Maverick, you're not alone." For the first time since I moved into Sunnyside, I believed it. That night, the neighborhood was quieter than usual. No security vehicle doing its slow cruise. No Karen stomping across sidewalks with her clipboard like it was a badge. Just porch lights flickering on at dusk, a few hesitant glances from neighbors, and Maverick curled beside my chair, finally truly at ease. But I knew this wasn't over. Not yet. Karen's arrest had made waves. By Monday, half the neighborhood had seen the doorbell footage shared anonymously in the local Sunnyside social media group. The sight of her being handcuffed in broad daylight was a first for this community, and people were talking. Quietly at first, but the tide had turned. 3 days later, I received a formal notice of hearing. Karen was being arraigned on 3 charges. Interference with a service animal under federal ADA law, animal cruelty under state law, harassment and intimidation. Her legal team, yes, she had won, immediately filed for bail and set a preliminary hearing date. I arrived early at the courthouse, Maverick at my side, his vest freshly brushed, his tags neatly tucked. We were the first to sit in the cold, wood-paneled courtroom. She arrived late. Karen Whitfield didn't shuffle, and like most defendants, she strode in, heels clicking, draped in a pale designer suit, lips pursed like this was a business meeting, not a criminal trial. Beside her was a man who looked like he billed in 6-minute increments. Sharp suit, tighter jaw. As the judge read the charges, her confidence began to fade, especially when the bailiff brought in a printed stack of ADA documents and video screenshots, images of Maverick recoiling, her hand outstretched, spray bottle mid-blast. Her lawyer tried to object. The judge didn't flinch. "Community rules," he said firmly, "are never above federal law, especially where disability protections are involved." Karen's face cracked for the first time, just slightly, and that was just the opening session. The second hearing brought forward testimony. I was sworn in. Maverick lay beside the stand the entire time, unmoving, silent, eyes tracking every person in the room. The judge noticed. "This the service animal in question?" he asked. "Yes, Your Honor." He's calm, disciplined, clearly trained. "Yes, sir. He's done more for me than most people ever have." I told my story. About the move. About the mailbox, the notices, the threats. About the HOA meeting and Karen's disregard for federal protections. About the spray, the scream, the recovery. Karen didn't meet my eyes once. Her lawyer tried to spin it. She was under stress, misunderstood the law, had no malicious intent. But then the judge turned to her. "Miss Whitfield, were you aware he was a service animal?" Karen hesitated. I didn't think the rules applied." "They don't," the judge said coldly, "because they're not rules. They're laws, federal laws. The Americans with Disabilities Act has been the standard for over 3 decades, and your ignorance of that law, paired with your repeated and documented hostility, constitutes not just negligence but willful interference." Karen opened her mouth. The judge raised a hand. "You wanted authority, Miss Whitfield. Well, here it is." 3 nights after the hearing, a special HOA meeting was called. This time, the community did show up. More people than I'd ever seen gathered in the clubhouse. Folding chairs crammed shoulder to shoulder. Standing room only at the back. Even residents I hadn't met before showed up, faces tense, jaws clenched. Mr. Larson, the HOA vice president, stood at the front. "Tonight," he said, "we're addressing a leadership issue that has put us all at legal and moral risk." He didn't mince words. He laid out the facts. The arrest, the federal charges, the liability placed on the HOA by Karen's actions. Then came the vote. Motion to remove Karen Whitfield from the board, effective immediately. Seconded. Vote. Unanimous. Not one hand opposed. Karen's seat was already empty. Her name tag had been pulled. Someone had replaced it with a yellow sticky note that simply read, "Not above the law." As the meeting adjourned, neighbors approached me, some with handshakes, others with apologies. "You stood up when none of us could. You made us brave." One older man, tears in his eyes, simply said, "Thank you." And Maverick, he sat at my feet, tail swishing once, just once, as if to say, "We did it." 2 weeks later, the final sentencing hearing arrived. Karen stood before the judge, not in her power suit, but in a plain navy dress, her hair tied back, her expression hollow. Her lawyer had negotiated a plea deal. She wouldn't fight the charges. "Miss Whitfield," the judge began, "you've pled guilty to interference with a federally protected service animal, criminal harassment, and animal cruelty. I've reviewed the circumstances, the testimony, and the impact of your actions, not just on Mr. Walker, but on this community." He leaned forward. "You've abused authority. You've misused power. You placed personal bias above basic human rights." He paused. "And now you'll learn accountability. Sentence: 30 days in county jail, $5,000 fine, 200 hours of community service at the local animal shelter, mandatory completion of a federal disability rights education program." Karen blinked. Once, twice. "But I was just enforcing the rules," she whispered. The judge didn't smile, didn't move. "The most important rule," he said softly, "is to know when to respect the law of the land." As she was led away by bailiffs, our eyes met. There was no fire left in her expression, just confusion, fear, realization, maybe even regret. I never saw Karen again. Rumor was she sold her house through a private broker and left town the day she got out of jail. The HOA underwent reform. New members joined. New bylaws were passed. And for the first time, the words ADA compliance became part of the HOA's official charter. Neighbors stopped whispering. They started talking. They started living. As for me and Maverick, we still sat on the porch most mornings, coffee in hand, tail wagging. Sometimes kids came by to pet him. People waved. A few even asked for advice on training their own dogs. Maverick had become a local legend, but he never let the fame go to his head. One evening, I sat back in the chair, watching the sunset bleed across the sky. Maverick leaned against my leg, eyes half closed, content. I reached down and scratched behind his ears. "We weathered it, didn't we, bud?" He sighed, deep and slow, and leaned harder into my hand. Some wars are loud, some are quiet, but the victories, they're always earned.